Hello everyone, your friendly neighborhood natty here. My name is Matthew. Today's video is going to be kind of a comparison video between the LCP1 and the LCP2. Reason being that I actually just recently bought a Ruger LCP1. Of course, the question is going to be why? Well, it seems to me that my training has progressed pretty far, pretty much to the degree that I prefer kind of heavy double action triggers. Now, granted, the LCP1 is not a double action trigger. It is, it's kind of a new system, I guess. It's not necessarily striker fired by definition, in that there is no striker. There is a hammer in both LCP1 and 2. It's just that the gun is partially cocked. You know, in LCP2, if I would say just arbitrarily by cocking the slide, I'd say the hammer is probably cocked 50% of the way. Probably the LCP1 is partially cocked, probably about 70% of the way. And it is a little heavier. It is kind of like a long pull. I really like that. It kind of reminds me of double action revolvers. I like the heavy trigger because it kind of acts as a safety. You know, that's pretty much how we think with revolvers, is that heavy double action pretty much serves as a nice safety. Now, before we begin the comparison to LCP1 and LCP2, some people may not know this, but the LCP1 actually has generational changes. It's got LCP1 Gen 1 and Gen 2, and then some people might refer to the LCP Custom as the Gen 3. So the Ruger LCP1 Gen 1, some of the differences in that is that the serial number has a dash. So it might be 692 dash whatever, whereas others won't have that dash in the serial number. Another thing is that it has supposedly, I didn't know, I never got to test one, but it has the worst trigger, and it also has the worst sights. You know, very small sights. Kind of reminds me of a friend of mine. He shot my Beretta Bobcat, and he also told me that the sights on that gun was incredibly small to non-existent. So apparently the Gen 1 Ruger LCPs have very little sights as well. And then also, Ruger does have on their website, if you happen to have Gen 1, because you're not going to find that in, you know, modern retail stores. You'll probably find it more in a private seller online or at a pawn shop. Some Gen 1 Ruger LCPs do need to be serviced. There is a recall for them. So be sure to go on there if you happen to have a Gen 1 and make sure that your Ruger LCP1 does not fall within that range of serial numbers. Now the Ruger LCP Gen 2, which is the one that I bought, it has better sights, much taller sights, better than the Gen 1 LCP sights. It's supposed to be a little bit better trigger, and in fact I would say the trigger is pretty similar to the LCP2, except that of course it's a long pull before that break. Now the LCP Custom, this is supposed to be the best version of them all. You can tell because it kind of has like that red anodized trigger. It's supposed to have better sights. I think they're interchangeable. Don't quote me on that. I think they are. And then a much better trigger. Now I didn't get to test that in person. I didn't see that at Shields or Gary's Gun Shop. But I didn't really go for that because I kind of got worried that I thought the trigger might be too good. You know, maybe as good as the LCP2, which is not what I wanted. You know, I kind of wanted a rougher trigger to kind of train with and increase my trigger discipline. Now, my experience with purchasing the LCP, Ruger LCP1, basically I wanted to test it out first. I did a lot of reading online just to be sure that this is exactly what I wanted. You know, people were complaining about the trigger, and it's like, okay, great, it'll be good for my training then. But of course, you know, you have to test these things in person if you can. And so first I had went to Shields. I'd gone to Shields to see if they have the Ruger LCP1, which they did, and that's what I expected. But I couldn't really get any help. Nobody was really there to help me, like, you know, get the gun out of the case so I could look at it. So I ended up going to Gary's Gun Shop instead. And so there I was able to get some help. They also had a Ruger LCP1. I didn't check see if it was a Gen 1 or a Gen 2, but Gary's Gun Shop is like, they have modern guns, but they have, like, you know, it's kind of a little bit like a pawn shop too, you know. They'll have stuff that isn't made anymore. So, but I don't think it was, because I could see the sights pretty well. But I tested out the Ruger LCP1 at Gary's Gun Shop, and I loved it. the trigger was pretty good. You know, it's not like a short, crisp one like the LCP2. It was a long pull, but it was a smooth long pull, kind of similar to like a revolver trigger. So I really liked it at the time. Now I wasn't gonna buy it from Gary's because Shields did have a promotion going on where you get like 5 points for every dollar spent. So I was gonna buy it from Shields. It's just nobody there would help me, you know, test it out, see if it's what I wanted. That's the only reason I went to Gary's, was to just have it, you know, have it in person so I could actually check it out, see how it holds, things like that, trigger pull. And so once I verified, like, okay, this is what I want, that's what I want to get, I went ahead back to Shields, and then I was able to get someone to help me because, you know, people only help you when you want to buy something, right? But I already verified that's what I wanted. So the guy was able to help me out. He took the LCP one out of its case, and I noticed that it kind of had this, maybe don't flash myself here, but it had this, yeah, it looks like this little lockback thing, which I didn't know the Ruger LCP had that. And he said that, the representative said that, the LCP added that it's supposed to act as a slide lock. And the one in the case display model, that one was very hard to lock the slide back, almost like it wasn't meant for it. And so I thought, well, okay, these guns aren't meant to, the slide isn't meant to lock back anyways, you know, after the gun is empty. So it's like, it's not a big deal to me that if there's something on there that is supposed to do something, but it can't do it. So I went ahead with it anyways. I purchased it, and this is the one that I got, which oddly enough, this one's slide locks back a lot easier. So in the store, I was having trouble locking the slide back, but this one, I guess I got lucky here. The slide, it locks back pretty dang easy, you know, and it lets go pretty easy too. So I guess I lucked out on that one. I will say though that the trigger on the display model was a lot better, and this one is not. This one's actually a little bit rough. You know, it's not as nice as the one in the display. So, well, you win some and you lose some, right? Now the cost for the LCP1, it was at $279.99, which the MSRP is $319 currently on the Ruger LCP website. Of course, we are talking post-COVID here. Obviously, prices were a lot better before that, but that's what it was. So $279, and then I had the Shields promotion thing. So if you spend more than $250, I think they take 25 off. And then I had like 3 gift cards. I had 3 gift cards, which took off $75, and then of course like $20 for tax. So it was like $199 by the time I was out the door with it. Already got checked by the FBI, all that stuff. So not a bad price. Granted though, if you go on Gunbroker, I was able to find the LCP one for $219. Now that's before shipping and taxes. You know, Gunbroker has of course initiated sales tax. So that goes on top of the cost of shipping. And then I've seen even a 1% compliance fee, so they just keep adding stuff up. And so if I had to guess, even though this cost me $279 originally in store, right? Online it probably would have been like $285, so it still would have been a little bit higher. Plus I wouldn't have gotten all the Shields points for using my Shields card, and then my gift card as well, which I had like $75 in gift cards. So I thought it was a pretty good buy. But you know, if you think that you can get it cheaper online on Gunbroker, you might be able to. You know, it really depends. That's the $219 is what I saw. And then I think for LCP2 online, if that's the one you want, I think that one was going for $289. Where is it? Yeah, $289. And that's before tax and shipping on Gunbroker. So just remember, it's more than that. Okay, finally we can talk about the comparison between the LCP1 and Gen 2 and then the Ruger LCP2. So the first question is, do the mags do the slides lock back? And from what I understood, neither one does. Neither one of them slide is going to lock back with an empty magazine. So this is the LCP2 magazine, and so putting it into LCP2, you know, it's not going to lock back. The slide does not lock back. Now you can make it lock back. As I said, the LCP1 and 2, they do have this bar here, which I would call a slide lock bar, you know. So you can certainly make the gun lock back like that for cleaning purposes or showing clear or things like that. But you know, neither one is going to lock the slide back. You know, LCP1 think I showed you already, but you'll see it doesn't lock back no matter what. Only the bar, you can make it lock back manually, but that's about it. So neither gun's slide locks back no matter what. Now, we can also look at the holsters. So both the LCP1 and LCP2 come with a pocket holster. This is the one for the LCP2, and this is the one for the LCP1. And if you ask me, they look exactly the same. So I'm going to say they're the same thing. I also have a Kydex IWB. This is for the LCP2. So as you can imagine, it works out perfectly. Just beautiful. Now, if I try the LCP1, it's not as beautiful. You know, it's a little loose, you know, so it doesn't hold very well. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and sell this holster along with the LCP2. Now, the next thing to talk about is, do the magazines interchange? When I was at the Shield store, the guy was telling me that they may or may not. He said something that the floor plate didn't match up. And I was like, okay, I have both guns, so I can test it myself. And so what I found is that all magazines tend to work out pretty smoothly in the LCP2. So this is the LCP2 mag, and it is no problem. Now, if I take the LCP1 magazine, okay, it's also no problem. It's pretty dang nice. I have extended mags, but these are for the LCP2, so of course they're gonna work out well. Now, when it comes to the LCP1, it can work. It just seems to be a little rough. I don't know if it's because the gun is still, you know, it's still new, but with the LCP2, well, let's do the LCP1 first. The LCP1, it works out perfectly, okay? Now, if I go to LCP2, you kind of have to, sometimes you have to like really kind of manhandle it. You got to push it in there to make it work. I think because this one's empty, it's not a problem. But if you look at the LCP2 extended magazine, you know, it's not enough to just lightly press. You really have to hit that in there to get that to go. But as far as I can tell, you know, as long as you really hit it in there, I think it's going to be just fine. And in the beginning, when I was trying the LCP2 mags and the LCP1, they really didn't want to go unless I like pressed in the mag release, then it went in smoother. I noticed something like that with my Browning 1911. It did the same thing with new Browning 1911 OEM mags. It just wouldn't go in there unless you pressed in the holster. But eventually I just kept trying it, not hitting it too hard, but I just like hit it harder and harder, and then it had no problem. And it's the same thing here, you know, with the LCP2, regular or extended, and the LCP1, you know, as long as you get a good hit, it's gonna be no problem. So in conclusion, you know, anything LCP1 seems to work out just fine in LCP2. Anything from LCP2 into LCP1, you may have to kind of rough handle it a little bit. Now, as far as the floor plate thing, I did notice that the floor plate's a little bit wider on the LCP1 magazine, and it's a little thinner on the LCP2 magazine. So I don't know if that's what the guy was talking about at the store, that like, oh, the mags might not work because of the magazine. Well, there was no problem between the magazines, but if he was talking about the floor plate, then it's like, yeah, I can see that the LCP1 magazine floor plate is wider. It's a little bit wider, you know, and the LCP2 floor plate, it's a little bit thinner. So I don't know if he thought that I was asking if you can switch the floor plates between the two, which I don't care that much, honestly. No, I don't care. But the floor plates are different. But no, that didn't seem to have an effect on the magazines. They're going to work with each other no matter what. You just got to be a little rough on the LCP2 mags into LCP1. Now, another thing I noticed that I was testing with snap caps is that the Ruger LCP1 ejection, when you kind of like move the slide back, it's a lot more vertical. You know, it's a little more vertical and a little stronger too. I noticed with the LCP2, when I did that with snap caps, the ejection is a lot weaker. It's a lot weaker and not as vertical. You know, it didn't have much oomph to it, which is interesting. I did shoot the LCP2 for, you know, verifying that the ammo hits where it needs to hit, function, things like that. I've shot it, so you know it worked fine. It was just weird to me that, oh, the LCP1 seems to have a much better, stronger ejection pattern than the LCP2. Granted, I shouldn't speak on that until I shoot the LCP1, but just testing it with snap caps, it seemed like the LCP1 had a better ejection system. Well, better ejection result. All right, so that's going to be the end of my Ruger LCP1 versus LCP2 comparison. I will end up selling this gun because I like the LCP1. Of course, you know, before the LCP1, I was thinking of getting an actual double action only, you know, pocket gun like this. But the only thing that came close was Smith & Wesson's Bodyguard, and I've shot that gun before, and I hated it. I hated it. Something about shooting the Bodyguard, the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard, it like hurt my finger for some reason. So I don't know if it was just pulling back something, but and I never felt that at all with the LCP2, which I'm hoping will be the case with the LCP1. So that's the only reason I didn't go with the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard. Also, it has to have a manual safety. You guys know I'm not big on that stuff. If I can help it, I won't get it. But there was one thing I really liked about the Bodyguard, and it was that it had second strike. Second strike's not important to me. I understand in a tactically combative way, it's not that important. But just the fact that like any true DAO would be able to second strike, you know what I mean? So that's the only thing in my head was like, oh, that's really cool that the Bodyguard can have that. But that's also why it's really important to test fire guns at a range if you can, because I was at Gary's and I test fired the Bodyguard and I was like, I want this gun. And then you fire it in real life and you're like, this sucks. I don't want this gun. So I'm hoping the LCP1 will give me a lot better luck. This is the double action like I ended up with. So please let me know if you have any questions about the LCP1, LCP2. I'll still have the LCP2 for a while. No one's bid on it, so someone might not end up buying it. But yeah, if you have any questions, you know, I mean, it's literally the same gun. You know, it's just a little different. Obviously, you have that little, you know, Glock additional safety there in the LCP2, which you don't have in the LCP1. They both come apart in the same way, so you know that little pin, that pin right there, you know, they both seem to have the same pin, you know, as far as I can tell. So yeah, so any questions you have about the LCP1 or 2, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
You learned martial arts! Martial arts, good!